never have to pity his hours. Baby, I hate to see you in the front of his car. You cry and complain, now the boy will start to you about the things. Say no, you pay me out when me see you with the ring. I hate it, baby, I hate it. You know, sometimes
WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 FM, your station for progressive information. WRFG provides the voice for those who have been traditionally denied access to broadcast media through the involvement of a broad base of community elements to guarantee that access. In the utilization of the Foundation's facilities and in its programs, the following communities will receive first priority: those who continue to be denied free and open access to the broadcast media, and those who suffer oppression or exploitation based upon class, race, sex, age, creed, disability, sexual orientation, or immigrant status.
Atlanta Progressive News is an online independent news service. For 10 years, APN has provided original, compelling, unique coverage in keeping with our progressive policy priorities. Thank you to our readers for supporting us and our mission to empower Metro Atlantans to make a meaningful difference in the democratic process. We provide coverage of local government, public policy, activism, elections, and more. Our website, with over 2,300 articles and posts, is online at atlantaprogressivenews.com.
boom, boom, doo 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 boom, boom, doo 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 boom, doo 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 boom, boom, doo 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 boom, boom, doo 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 doo. We plant the food, we drive the cab, we load the ship, we run the lab, we build the bridges, we fly the plane, we do the work. This is our day, we do the work. Boom, boom. We do the work, boom, boom. We do the work, this is our day. We type the page, we clean the streets, we sew the clothes, we change the sheets. We sell the goods, yes we do. We lay the stone, we do the work. This is our home. We do the work, we do the work. We do the work, we do the work. We do the work, this is our home.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Labor Forum. You are tuned to WRFG 89.3 FM in Atlanta. My name is Diane Mathowitz. I'm a retired auto worker, member of UAW Local 10. Seated next to me here as a co-host is Paul McLennan. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Diane.
And Paul is a member of ATU. That's the MARTA workers. That's Local 32. And Paul is also a retired worker. And we are fortunate, so fortunate, to be able to host this program and get to speak every week with some of the most progressive, most active, most justice-minded folks in the labor movement and in the community. And we're really always happy to be able to share those people's opinions and voices with you, our listeners here on the Labor Forum. Although the opinions that are expressed on this program may not necessarily be those of the board of directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG, I do want to assure you that the Labor Forum is a program that meets the mission of this station, which is that we are really very determined and very clear that both from the cultural standpoint and the public affairs standpoint, that we bring the opinions of those that are sort of really marginalized and left out of big business media, and that we are a progressive station, which means that we are for the uplifting of all human beings and in support of human rights everywhere. So we're going to start our first segment off, as we always do, with labor headlines, and then we'll have This Week in Labor History. And then we've got some wonderful guests coming into the program, so please do stay tuned for the entire hour. And before I get to the labor headlines, I want to make sure that you're aware that here at the Labor Forum, we have a whole team of people who really work to make sure that we have both quality program, but that we're also trying to reach out on all the platforms of modern communication. So the Labor Forum has its own website. It's www.WRFGLaborForum.org. We also are on Twitter, and we have a Facebook page. We'd very much like you to participate, join, and make your comments on any of those platforms for that you can. And of course, we are also live streaming this program on our YouTube channel. And you always can go to the YouTube channel for an archived copy, both audio and visual, of every program that we do. So that's all the ways you can stay in touch. And obviously, if you have a comment that you want to send directly to us, you can email us at our Gmail address, which is laborforumwrfg@gmail.com. And now for our labor headlines for March 7th, 2016. Tomorrow, March 8th, is International Working Women's Day. And there is a small, and I want to say very small, possibility that some big business news outlet will say a word or two or show a picture. But despite the fact that on March 8th, millions of people around the world will mark the day, and despite the fact that its origins are in the historic 1908 strike in New York City, organized by the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, that rich ongoing example of women workers' enormous contributions to the struggle will, no doubt, be ignored by corporate news. So here is the story that should be headlined, but you will have to go to the internet to see the images and video in country after country of women workers and their allies marching, holding rallies, disrupting and confronting the powers that be, and also celebrating the leaders and organizations whose members broke down barriers and changed history. As I first mentioned, the establishment of IWD, or International Women's Day, comes from the heroic struggles of women, many of them immigrants, who toiled in sweatshops and mills in New York City and elsewhere in the late 1800s and early 1900s, but particularly the strike of 1908, which won improvements in wages and working conditions. In 1910, socialist women at a conference in Europe proposed the idea of an international day as a strategy to promote equal rights, including suffrage for women. In 1914, March 8th became the internationally recognized date. An interesting fact is that in 1917, Russian women in St. Petersburg went on strike on International Working Women's Day, and the slogan they had was "Bread and Peace." It was specifically a call to end World War I and the rule of the Tsar. An action, that strike in St. Petersburg, launched the 1917 Russian or October Revolution that gave birth to the Soviet Union. Demonstrations already took place this past weekend and in some places like New York City, but thousands more will happen tomorrow, bringing inspiration and hope to a global vision of justice, liberation, and equality for all. Now, on March 4th, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers announced a boycott against the fast food giant Wendy's. This is only the second time the Florida Farm Worker Group, whose members pick tomatoes, has called for a boycott of a business. This tactic was first used against Taco Bell in an effort to establish the Fair Food Program, which required buyers of Florida tomatoes to pay 1 penny a pound more. The additional penny went to the workers, not the growers, and became the basis for a significant poverty reduction among these workers. Taco Bell in 2005 became the first corporation to sign on to the Fair Food Program, that also requires water, bathroom facilities, and rest breaks in the fields, no discrimination or sexual harassment, and provides workers a voice on the job. Every other major fast food brand has signed on to the agreement, as well as national grocery chains and restaurants. A remarkable series of victories for workers' rights. Wendy's, according to the CIW, has not only refused to join, but has actually stopped buying Florida tomatoes in favor of in favor of even lower cost growers in Mexico, where human rights abuses of the workers are notorious. A 5-city boycott Wendy's tour opened up in New York City with a vibrant march to the offices of Wendy's board chair, Nelson Peltz. For some amazing pictures of that demonstration, and then in Columbus, Ohio, you can go to the CIW Facebook page and website. Next on their tour is Louisville, March 9th, then Gainesville, Florida, March 11th, and Palm Beach, Florida on March 12th. And our last item is local. Today, the members of the Atlanta Public School Board are scheduled to vote on the so-called turnaround plan to address low-performing schools in the system. The details were announced just over a month ago and involve closing several schools, merging schools, and putting them under private management. Hundreds of teachers would lose their jobs and would be forced to reapply to these private companies with lower pay and benefits. Hundreds of children will be transferred to locations distant from their neighborhoods and home. The schools would operate under the private companies' rules. This takeover would begin with the 2016-17 school year. The rush to implement this privatization is supposedly to prevent a takeover by the state if Governor Deal's Opportunity School District Plan is approved in the November election. OSD would allow a governor-selected superintendent to close schools, fire all teachers and administrators, change the curriculum, and turn management over to private entities. Elected school boards would have no say, but would still be required to finance them from public funds. Clearly, the battle for public education is only going to get more critical. And here on the Labor Forum, we will keep you informed as best we can about all the twists and turns. Thank you for listening to that. And we will now turn to Paul, who's really has a very important story to tell all of you.
Thanks, Diane. And this is very related to International Women's Day. At approximately midnight last Thursday morning, March 3rd, the general coordinator of the National Council of Indigenous and Popular Organizations of Honduras, or COPIN, Berta Cáceres, was assassinated in her hometown of La Esperanza in Honduras. Berta Cáceres, 45 years old, was one of the leading indigenous human rights activists in the country. She spent her life fighting in defense of indigenous rights, particularly to prevent the privatization of land and natural resources. A large crowd accompanied her body to its final resting place amid calls for justice. Many of those carrying her coffin on their shoulders through the dusty streets of La Esperanza on Saturday were Lenca indigenous people for whose rights she had fought. Drummers pounded out Afro-Honduran rhythms as mourners chanted, "The struggle goes on, and Berta Cáceres is present today and forever." A Lenca woman, she grew up during the violence that swept through Central America in the 1980s. Her mother, a midwife and social activist, took in and cared for refugees from El Salvador, teaching her young children the value of standing up for disenfranchised people. She grew up to become a student activist, and in 1993, she co-founded her organization to address the growing threats posed to Lenca communities by illegal logging, fight for their territorial rights, and improve their livelihoods. In the last few weeks, violence and repression towards her, COPIN, and the communities it supports had escalated. In Rio Blanco on February 20th, Berta Cáceres Copine, and the community of Rio Blanco faced threats and repression as they carried out a peaceful action to protect the river Gualcarque against the construction of a hydroelectric dam by the internationally financed Honduran company DESA. As a result of Copine's work supporting the Rio Blanco struggle, Berta Caceres had received countless threats against her life and was granted precautionary measures by the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights. On February 25th, another Lenca community of 50 families supported by Copine was violently evicted and their homes destroyed with backhoes and other heavy construction equipment. In 2009, a military coup overthrew the elected government of Manuel Zelaya. The coup was carried out by graduates of the U.S. Army School of the Americas here in Columbus, Georgia. Since the coup, Honduras has witnessed an explosive growth in environmentally destructive megaprojects that would displace indigenous communities. Almost 30% of the country's land was earmarked for mining concessions, creating a demand for cheap energy to power future mining operations. To meet this need, the government approved hundreds of dam projects around the country, privatizing rivers and land, displacing people, and causing environmental damage to an area considered sacred by the Lenca. Honduras has the world's highest murder rate, and it has become the deadliest country in the world for environmentalists. Between 2010 and 2014, 101 environmental campaigners were killed in the country. Honduran human rights organizations report there have been over 10,000 human rights violations by state security forces, and impunity is the norm. Most murders go unpunished. The Associated Press has repeatedly exposed ties between the Honduran police and death squads, while U.S. military training and aid for the Honduran security forces continues. Berta Caceres was internationally known for winning the 2015 Goldman Environmental Prize for her advocacy on behalf of the Lenca people. She led campaigns on a wide variety of issues, including women's rights and the presence of U.S. military bases on Lenca land. In 2013, she told Al Jazeera, "The Army has an assassination list of 18 wanted human rights fighters, with my name at the top. I want to live. There are many things I still want to do in this world, but I have never once considered giving up fighting for our territory, for a life with dignity, because our fight is legitimate. I take lots of care, but in the end, in this country where there is total impunity, I am vulnerable. When they want to kill me, they will do it." A statement issued by Berta's daughter, son, and mother said, "Our Berta is the greatest inspiration we have known. That is why we feel a need to ensure that the truth about her life and struggle is heard. She is an eternal fighter against racism, patriarchy, and the oppressive and murderous capitalist system. Her struggle is marked by a vigorous anti-imperialism consistently affirmed in her international activities and her thorough rejection of the coup d'etat financed and supported by the United States. Berta's struggle was not only for the environment, it was for system change in opposition to capitalism, racism, and patriarchy."
Thank you, Paul. If you go onto the internet, there are just dozens and dozens of articles and images of this valiant woman. And of course, her murder was just atrocious. I want to say that actually last night there was a vigil that took place here in Atlanta that several of us here at the Labor Forum went to. And it was about the three young men, three Sudanese youth that were found murdered execution style in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it's kind of interesting how there's been relatively little information about it. You almost have to go to the Fort Wayne or press to see it. There was a vigil held kind of thorough investigation in the murder of Berta. And we will now have a short message from WRFG. We very much want you to come to this fundraiser, and you can hear all about it on this message. And when we come back, we're really pleased that Jamie Dukes, who drove all the way from Augusta, Georgia, is here in the studio with us. He's going to talk about the situation at Fort Gordon and what's happening to the membership of AFGE Local 2017. So please do stay tuned.
Lordy, lordy, the Peach Blossom is 40. WRFG's longest-running fundraiser, the Peach Blossom Bluegrass Festival, is turning the big 4-0 this year, and we need you to help us celebrate. The date is Saturday, April 2nd. The new location is Sutton Hall in Douglasville, just a short drive from Atlanta on I-20. We are looking for quality craft and merchandise vendors to sell their wares at our festival. If interested, call 404-523-3471, 404-523-3471. And stay tuned to WRFG 89.3 FM for the lineup of live performers at the 40th Annual Peach Blossom Bluegrass Festival.
Welcome back. You're tuned into the Labor Forum here on WRFG. And whether you're listening on your radio, your mobile app, on your computer, watching us on YouTube, welcome back. And we have with us Jamie Dukes. Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for coming all this way to be on this program. We really appreciate it.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
All right, so here's why Jamie in particular is invited to come today. We haven't had too many federal workers on the program, members of unions, and we heard about this situation at Fort Gordon, which is in Augusta, Georgia, through the state AFL-CIO. And so we called Jamie up and invited him to come talk about what's going on. And so please do keep your ears alert, because this is a really critical situation of several hundred workers in that city. All right, so Jamie, AFGE stands for?
American Federation of Government Employees.
Okay, and you're local 2017, and you all work at Fort Gordon.
Yes, Fort Gordon outside of Augusta.
All right, so I asked you on the phone if you wouldn't mind describing what kind of jobs that folks have at Fort Gordon, and then if you would go right into, after that, telling us what the crisis is with the management not abiding by contract, the contract.
Yes, the Fort Gordon employees out there represent doctors, nurses, lab techs, IT guys, professional grade employees. We provide the main support to the soldiers out there. Recently, for the last year, we've been under attack. We've been under attack by management. Management refused to honor the labor management agreement that we have in place. Our employees are constantly under attack. Employees are getting reprimanded, suspended, and actually terminated. And we're at the point now, we're putting our foot down.
All right, so can you explain to me that part of this includes that they fired you?
Yes.
And you were the president of the local.
Yes, I'm still the president of the local. Management saw fit to fire me for medical inability. I had a work-related injury, and I was under reasonable accommodation. But the moment I became president of the local AFGE 2017, management came in 6 o'clock in the morning and issued me a termination.
Okay, so now, the workers who are listening to this program and others, many of us, for example, I worked for a private corporation. Paul worked for a public entity. You work for a military entity.
That's correct.
Now, all three of us have certain kinds of issues. We have certain ways of being able to manage to get a contract. As a UAW member, I certainly was able to have advantage of a long history of very progressive and militant trade unionism that generated real rights on the job, and which I much appreciated. Public sector workers have been under attack tremendously. We've had many programs here about the issue of privatization and what's happening, how public sector workers are so denigrated. But do you have to negotiate with a general?
Yes. Yes.
I really want to know how that works.
We have a labor management contract in place, and in that labor management contract, it stipulates all the actions that are to be taken by management, and if those actions are outside the labor management agreement, we're supposed to sit down and negotiate in good faith, including disciplinary. Everything should be handled at the lowest level possible. What's happening? Management has a contract that they refuse to even honor now. They're not even looking at the contract when the union is asking to sit down to the table and see, hey, where can we find a middle ground? We're not even getting a response back from our co-workers on the other side. And I say co-workers because I believe that the union and the management team, we are co-workers and we should be one team. But obviously there's only one side that's showing up for the ball game.
All right, so of course I got to ask, so is there a step above this management that's refusing to go talk about this? I mean, I don't know. You get to go higher in the Pentagon?
Well, and that may be an option that we look at. Our national vice president on several occasions has asked to meet with the general. For whatever reason, the general has refused to get back with the local or the national vice president. And he has put out an olive branch to try to resolve some of this stuff. And for whatever reason, Fort Gordon is not willing to sit down to the table with us. And it is actually hurting a lot of employees.
Now, when we spoke on the phone, you told me that Fort Gordon is actually the largest employer in the Augusta area. Is
it would
correct?
rank as far as the top two. They do hire in that particular area from several counties, McDuffie County, Columbia County, Burke County, and Richmond County. So we got employees from all over that are working out there.
Well, let me ask this question, or maybe Paul's got one first.
Well,
Go ahead.
The question I have is, why now? Why is this happening now?
That's a question that we would like an answer to as well, because since I've taken over in October, we have tried to sit down to the table with them to address some stuff. We have put in for data requests to look over information to see what's going on. Data requests, grievance, ULP, you name it. Management is not responding and not willing to sit down to the table.
Well, I want to ask this question. So are the other large employers in the Augusta area unionized?
There are other unions out in the area, mostly from the blue collar sector. But as far as the AFGE, we are actually the largest union in that particular area.
Well, now I have to think right away that part of this obstinance, part of this absolute intractability has to do, very frankly, with the whole pushback against unions in general. There was just an article in the paper that said that Georgia has just a 4% unionization rate.
That's right.
And that there's, I think, 2 states with less. And so all across the country, my own union has been pretty much decimated, both by outsourcing, plants closing, technology increasing, that kind of stuff. The Paul's union is under incredible pressure. Again, privatization, attempting to deprive workers in general of any rights. So my first thought is, okay, this, because it's a very significant employer, that part of Paul asking why now is that it's a reflection of this pushback in general. And certainly they have, I don't know whether they have a fear factor, I would imagine, that is a little harder because you're a federal employee and this is a military base and there's so many more ways to kind of intimidate people. This is just my surmising.
I think one of the biggest issue here is the fact that Fort Gordon has over 70-some buildings that have asbestos and mold in the area. And the union went to management and say, hey, let's sit down and discuss how we can make the workplace safer. We have employees that have respiratory problems because of the asbestos and the mold. And the moment that came up, management decided to take a hardline approach. And it wasn't that, the union was trying to put management on blast, but if we are one team, we all want a safe and hazard-free work environment. Some of those buildings were built since 1954, yet they have never been upgraded. We have tile on the floor that has been disturbed, but yet in management memos, they say as long as you don't disturb the tile. Well, as we walk into the areas and stuff, they got tile that's disturbed on the floor. The ceiling tile are hanging down, saturated. Several of the buildings, the roof need to be replaced. And we're just asking management to do their part. That's all we're asking, for management to do their part and create a safe environment that is covered in a labor management agreement as well.
So we just have like 2 minutes left. And so there's a rally at the gates of Fort Gordon tomorrow. And you can give us a little bit of information about that. I don't know whether our local media will cover it, but we'll sure let folks know about it on the labor forum again.
Okay. We are having a rally, informational rally, tomorrow at 4:30 outside Gate 2 along Gord Highway. This is a chance for all the employees to come out, get information, but also voice their concerns with what's going on as far as the hazard in the work area, also the disciplinary that some of these employees are enduring, from reprimand to terminations and suspension. Employees are a little fed up, and we just ask management to be fair with these employees. And these aren't employees that are 1 and 2 years. These are employees with 15 to 20 years. These are also employees before they were federal government workers. They were U.S. military members, and they deserve a right. So tomorrow at 4:30 along Gordon Highway, outside Gate 2, AFGE and locals from other areas are coming together to rally outside. Media will be there, and we hope that this would get the attention of management.
I should let folks know that there's actually transportation from Atlanta. I don't know, horses, there's still space on this bus? You want to come up here real quick and just give a telephone number?
Telephone, my name is Horace Cooper. The telephone number is 404-275-4739. We'll be leaving at 12:30, and we still have space. Thank you.
Thanks so much to both of you, Horace and Jamie, for being here. And I'll be on the bus, so we'll get a chance to meet again tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have another message from WRFG, and then our next guests are going to pop on into the studio, and we're going to have a discussion about this anti-immigrant legislation that is just, I don't know, goes around and around and around at the Georgia legislature every year, and always is directed towards people who don't have a voice and people who do work. So stay tuned.
Lordy, Lordy, the Peach Blossom is 40. WRFG's longest running fundraiser, the Peach Blossom Bluegrass Festival, is turning the big 4-0 this year, and we need you to help us celebrate. The date is Saturday, April 2nd. The new location is Sutton Hall in Douglasville, just a short drive from Atlanta on I-20. We are looking for one quality food vendor to feed our fans at the festival. We are also looking for quality craft and merchandise vendors. If interested, call 404-523-3471, 404-523-3471. And stay tuned to WRFG 89.3 FM for the lineup of live performers at the 40th Annual Peach Blossom Bluegrass Festival.
Hey, we're back. We're just getting our guests seated for our next interview, and again, another one I'm looking forward to. So we invited Stephanie Cho. It's Advancing Justice is the short name, right?
Asian Americans Advancing Justice,
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Correct. And Azadeh Shahshahani, who's been on the program before, we appreciate her expertise on all the issues regarding immigration. I think this is Stephanie's first time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, so there have been several bills, and they come up some form 1 year after another year, and it's always accompanying the most incredible rhetoric. And so let's start with this English only bill. You want to weigh in on that one, Stephanie?
Sure. So that's Senate Resolution 675, and it's to change the Constitution or edit the Constitution so it would be English only. What's different about it from the, I believe, 1996 resolution that had already passed is that it's going to be way more far-reaching, particularly around driver's license. So we have a driver's license issue also in SB6. So it seems that driver's license is sort of becoming this weird card kind of issue, like, and way of doing discrimination by like administrative ways. So 675 is really dangerous because it's going to affect so many different immigrants, and for like Asian Americans in particular, that's like 65,000 just in Georgia alone. So we're really concerned about that particular bill, but it is something that we've been working on organizing around for this whole session. And so it also, I think in the legislature, it came up at the end of the day on like Friday, like a week ago, like literally at 4:45, they called it up to the floor too. So it's been kind of a roller coaster since then. Exactly. Resurrected it from the dead. And so, and it's just part of this trio, right, of like anti-immigration bills that are coming up.
So let me be like a devil's advocate, like the unreasonable people at the state capitol, and they say, well, why shouldn't immigrants learn English? And what is the difference between English being, it already is the state language. What does it mean for it to be in the Constitution of the state of Georgia that English is the language?
I think it's like a bill that's so unnecessary because it already says that in the Constitution, number one. And number two is that it's just a sneaky way to sort of like really discriminate people and not be a welcoming state. So Atlanta in particular is part of this like welcoming, city initiative with all of these other mayors, welcoming America, all of these things. And we can look at it from a business angle, we can look at it from, just, people angle. But really the problem is that people aren't seeing that sort of like how that language is getting turned around on us and really, sort of affecting the people that people don't really see that connection. The other thing is that English only is just this dangerous way of putting forth a particular kind of propaganda around if you're a U.S. citizen, then you need to learn English. And we're saying that, of course, you need to learn English, but you should also be able to have access to services in the language that you feel comfortable, particularly around driver's license, particularly around for services, if you need the services, particularly in shelters, particularly in for domestic violence situations. That is the things that we feel like are very dangerous.
Trials,
right? Interpretation. I mean, there's so many different places where it's like, yes, English is like a language that you should learn, but you can't also say that, if you want real immigrant integration, you have to also help people and give them some real serious pathways to that sort of progress.
Do you want to add anything on this issue?
I think we should be cognizant of the larger message of all of these bills, which is really a xenophobic, racist message that's being delivered year after year by some in the legislature. And, some of the groups that are behind these bills do unfortunately have a xenophobic agenda. I mean, around this English-only measure, which has surfaced in different years. At the Georgia legislature, I was at a hearing a few years ago where somebody affiliated with an anti-immigrant organization, I believe it was pro-English, he was talking about that, the fact that, well, we don't want our driver's licenses to be available in languages such as Arabic. So, again, using the Islamophobia element to try to, combine it with anti-immigrant sentiments and to try to drive home some of these measures. And so, you see the same thing this year with this measure, with the one trying to basically make a scarlet letter to target deferred action recipients, the students, the hardworking students who now have a way to drive and to stigmatize them, really for, to score some cheap political points. So it's all, as we all know, none of these have any purpose, any real purpose or logic behind them. It's just to appeal to a certain sector of the electorate, unfortunately.
So this program here, the Labor Forum, we have a very strong sense of the international character of working people. And we feel that the bond among those that do the work, this is the song which starts our program off, regardless of the language that they speak, are in fact the true makers of wealth, should have the benefit of what they produce. So it strikes me as very kind of nutsy that in this globalized economy where Georgia is attempting to bring companies and investment from around the world and is looking to take its own products around the world, and that we recognize that literally everything, whether it's what we eat or what we wear, that is parts of it or some element of it came from another country where people spoke another language. So with the value of the internet, the value of us being able to converse, see what's going on around the world, the idea that it's to me, it's a reflection of white supremacy. I have no other way to put it. That English needs to be the language of the globe. I don't know if either of you want to comment on my rant there, but all right, well then let's everybody's just shaking their head.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're looking at each other shaking our head. That's our commentary. But I definitely think it's hard because, Atlanta is trying to position themselves as a global city, as a, really sophisticated modern city. And sophisticated modern cities have tons of immigrants in them. And historically, immigrants make the country better. Immigrants make the city better. Immigrants make everything sort of better. And if you don't send a welcoming message, then it really provides this sort of like, you're saying one thing, but then you want the businesses here, but then really when they're actually here, you don't want them to be able to contribute, you don't want them to be really part of society. And it really, I think that sometimes legislators don't think that companies are savvy to it, but they definitely are. If they see some place where they say that they want them, but really that it's almost sort of backhanded, then I don't think that companies are going to really want to come in here. That's the reality.
I have a question, Stephanie, about when people think about this issue, the way it's been reduced in what we're hearing with the election is Muslims and immigrants, mainly from Mexico and Central America. So could you say a little about your organization and why you're interested in this issue?
Yeah, like I said before, it affects 65,000 Asian Americans here in Georgia. And that's a giant population. It's about driving. It's about access to services. When we're talking about Asian American, it's such a giant category. It's not just like one particular, I'm East Asian, right? But then we're talking about South Asian, we're talking about Southeast Asian, we're talking about Pacific Islanders. It's a huge demographic. And so it really, in terms of discrimination, it's so widespread. And I think, what has happened, and I was talking about this with somebody else, like one of the staff, is that, so the Trumpism and sort of the, different groups are talking about, Latinos maybe, and they're talking about, or sort of spewing this like sort of Islamophobia. But what they're not talking about really is Asians. And it's really disturbing to me that they're just completely leaving them out of just sort of the conversation, like especially as this election sort of heats up. Because again, we're left out of that conversation when we really make up a huge population. Also, I'm sure that everyone knows here too is that Asians make up the largest immigrant population and fastest growing immigrant population here in the South. So,
could you say a little more about where those people are coming from? For example, I know in Clarkson there's Bhutanese.
I think the breakdown goes, I mean, it depends on the area, but I think is it South Asian first, and then I think it is.
Many of our listeners may not know the term South Asian, what that refers to. Could you talk about the countries more specifically?
Indian, Pakistani, I don't know, just like anything in that region that's South Asian. Then we're looking at, I think the next one is like Korean or Chinese. So Korean and Chinese are probably next. Probably Korean is a little bit higher than it's Chinese, and then I think it's been a sort of variety too. And in that, like particularly with Asians, it's like we also have a really diverse group of religions that we practice too. It's not just about Christianity, and so there's, like there was all this stuff that's going down about the religious freedom things, and that's definitely affecting, Asian Americans too.
Azadeh, let's go to the next bill that you mentioned already, which you referred to as the Scarlet Letter Bill.
I like what you said about Yellow Star. I think that's it.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's
So people again this one is again, it costs a lot of money and it's so punitive. Could you talk about what it actually would do and who it's aimed at and affecting?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a history behind this bill. It surfaced last year. The legislator behind it is Senator McCoon, who is familiar to many of your listeners as being behind some of the most right-wing legislation here in the state. And so he last year actually introduced a measure that would prohibit deferred action recipients from driving. So deferred action recipients are, could be survivors of immigrant survivors of domestic violence. It could be the students, the young people who were basically allowed the opportunity to stay in the country and be able to drive through the presidential executive actions through a program called DACA that went into effect in 2012. And so the state attorney general actually issued an opinion saying that per federal law, these students, these young people are in fact should in fact be able to drive, and but that didn't really stop the some in the legislature such as McCoon, and so he put forward this measure last year, basically banning DACA recipients from driving, which obviously makes no sense because here you are, you have lawful. You have lawful presence, you're allowed to stay in the country. And then, obviously you need to be able to get to work and, to pick up your siblings from school or just be able to function. You need a driver's license, which is a point that was raised on the floor by a Republican last year. And so that bill failed. So then he, tried to push it again this year. And so at the beginning when this bill came to the fore, it actually looked a bit different. So it said that, the deferred action recipients should get a different license. It should be, vertical, and then it should also have the pejorative term illegal alien on the face of the driver's license. So imagine presenting that to a law enforcement officer. Already, if you don't look Caucasian, if you have an accent, let's be realistic, already you're subjected to racial profiling. And so now you have this scarlet letter. I mean, I can't imagine what type of abuse just showing that would subject a deferred action recipient to. So, through much advocacy by organizations such as Stephanie's and, individuals and the students themselves and businesses, that measure has now changed a bit. So it doesn't say anymore that you can't drive. It just says that you're now going to get for the renewal. So that, the folks who already have driver's licenses, those aren't going to be taken away from them. They're going to hold on to them. But then for renewal, you're going to get a different document called the driving privilege card. And then that also doesn't function as an ID. You have to have a separate ID with you if you are, a deferred action recipient. And so basically the status of that is that it has passed the Senate and now is pending in the House. So.
Is there any other piece of particular pernicious legislation that you want to let our listeners know about? Because there's only several more days left of this chance for the General Assembly to wreak havoc. And so is there something else that listeners should know about? Because while we encourage, obviously, that people be informed and that they act on their information and their opinions about it. So what else is there on the pipeline that would cause harm? And again, I want to make sure that we understand that the ability of people to, to have a job, to be able to get to that job, to go to school, are all the kinds of rights that we here on the Labor Forum say everybody has to have.
Yeah. The only other one is House Bill 781, which says that you have to be a U.S. citizen to be on any of the local councils or commissions or boards. To be honest, things that a lot of people, it's very hard to get civic participation on, and so there that was put through too. That's in the I'm trying to think. It's on the Senate side. I'm not sure. I can't remember which committee it's on right now.
So this would be even in a volunteer capacity.
That is a volunteer job.
No pay.
But, so what's disturbing about that, obviously, is that it really limits the civic participation. If you're in trying to move through, and trying to learn about civic participation and to be actually active, which is what we want everybody to be, it would not allow you to do that. They have done great. The Democrats actually have done amazing amendments to this bill. So if you're in process, you can still serve. So they've been doing let's just put it this way. They're doing a lot of amendments to this particular one. So let's really watch out for that, because I think that that's actually going to be really great, some of the amendments that they put forward already. So if there can be a couple more, I think that that's going to be really positive.
Does that mean that somebody who has a green card could not be on a,
so now
under the original?
That was the original. Now, because of the amendments, they've pretty much just added people back.
Again,
but what as Azadeh was touching on, I mean, this is the thing. It's the sentiment, right? It's not really, sort of like what the bills exactly say. It's just this sort of very unwelcoming thing. We want you here, but yet we don't want you to participate. We want you here, but we don't want you to have a voice. And that's, obviously that's the message it's really sending. Makuna is really behind most of them, or at least two of them in particular. But we also have another representative, Rassenberger, who's actually in Johns Creek. He's behind HB 781. Johns Creek has a giant Asian population.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the biggest, actually. It's like mostly Indian, then Chinese, then Korean.
Well, we just have like 8 minutes or so. All right, so we talked about some very specific kind of right-wing anti-immigrant legislation, but let's go beyond just the borders of Georgia and the politicians here, and try to talk a little bit about what you two see as the root cause. What's really driving this? Because, as you say, there's kind of a dual character to this. Many businesses and many people call and support immigrants coming to the United States. Many times it's true that the immigration pattern is racist. Mm-hmm. And of course we talk here on this program about how many of the policies, particularly the foreign policies of the United States, the wars, the occupations, mm-hmm. Drive this immigration. Mm-hmm. So in both of yours opinion, what is it that an alert, activist, progressive community should be doing to address these bigger causes of what's behind what's going on in Georgia, not in other states? Who wants to go first?
I mean, in terms of, the roots of the migration, obviously there needs to be a fundamental change to the U.S. foreign policy. So that's what we need to be pushing for. I mean, as you're talking about, the humanitarian crisis at the border, we saw women and children coming from Central America. In Europe, we see people from Syria and, Iraq and elsewhere are fleeing to Europe. And I think, we here as Americans need to be very cognizant of the role of the U.S. government in creating these crises, especially in Central America. Let's remember last Thursday we had the murder of an indigenous rights activist, Bertha.
Yeah, we led the program off with that.
Okay, so your listeners already are aware of that. I have to say that I actually had the honor of meeting Bertha in 2013, and even at that time, she was, she was living underground. She was already on a death list in Honduras, and this is a government that the U.S. government provided tacit support to. The U.S. government obviously supported the coup in an indirect way. And so, as a result, you now have a militarized state and murders and torture and persecution of activists such as Bertha and many others. So, it's an unsafe environment, and people obviously to ensure their safety have to seek refuge in the United States. So changing U.S. foreign policy, basically calling for the U.S. government to cut military aid to governments such as Honduras would be a first step. And then once people are here, obviously we need to stand in solidarity with immigrants and Muslims who are under attack. So the event, for example, that was held in Clarkston a few months ago, when the anti-Muslim Islamophobic rhetoric was at its height, we need to have more events like that. And I think, going forward, we just need to speak out and say this rhetoric is unacceptable. It's just, unbelievable how ugly it's got.
I should just say the event that Azadeh was referencing was the Welcome to Immigrants and Refugees that was held at Clarkston at the Memorial Presbyterian Church.
That you helped organize.
But yes. So all of us here are intimately involved too, knowledgeable about that. Part of what the labor forum is all about. Okay, so Stephanie, do you have anything you want to add to what Azadeh said?
Yeah, I would just say, supporting really true immigrant integration. True immigrant integration is about, helping people with jobs, people with language, right? Like real language access, not cutting the programs that are already existing, like with adult schools and that kind of stuff, right? It's like having that full program and thinking about what does it really take? And I would say in addition, I really think that a lot of people, particularly people who have, they're like, oh, my parents were immigrants, or a long time ago, my grandparents were immigrants. To be an immigrant now and to get your papers now is a totally different process. And I think that a lot of people, particularly who, even obviously everyone has roots in immigration, they don't see that this is really, really a different thing, when we're talking about immigration. And so, I don't know, it's just making me think about there needs to be more sort of critical political education on what does it take to be, to get your papers now. It's I think really a lot of people, if they saw how hard it was and the things that people have to do and expensive, and it's just, this process is on a totally another level, right? And I think that that's part of it, is it's not really understanding where people are coming from, not taking the time, but really lack of programs, lack of real, sort of engagement with people. It's not good.
Can you say a little about how the bridge building is working between all the different groups that are being affected, the progress that you're making, or the obstacles?
I mean, I think this year in the legislature, we have a crew, we're strong. We were talking about this, I feel like we're united on actually the trio of bills, which I feel is really good. I think that there could always be more coordination with that. And then, I don't know if we want to talk about, but we are going to have an event, right, at Emory. Hopefully, yeah, we're going to have an event on, I don't know, we're to be determined about the actual thing, but it's around I don't know what the thing, I don't even want to call it, Islamophobia. and and we'll have some student speakers, and then also like just some folks talking about sort of how it's like affecting the sort of like message of welcoming Atlanta, but then there's this other thing happening too, and how it's like affecting those sort of larger political things. Is that right? That's the right message that we're saying.
Well, we'll certainly, let our listeners know once it's determined.
That'd be great.
We have like one
quick announcement, and it's very relevant to the theme of immigrants, rights, and workers. So this Friday, Georgia Detention Watch, in partnership with other organizations, is going to have a press conference in front of the ICE office in downtown Atlanta. And ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the enforcement arm of the Department of Homeland Security. On the 7th anniversary, it's exactly the 7th anniversary of the death of Roberto Medina Martinez, the 39-year-old immigrant who perished at the Stewart Detention Center because of the negligence of medical officials at Stewart. And the unfortunate fact is that he wasn't the only one affected, even though, obviously he died, but thousands of others after Mr. Medina have also been affected in different ways by the gross lack of adequate medical attention at Stewart and all the other indignities at this facility. So we're going to be there at 11 a.m. and we're going to call for the Stewart Detention Center to be shut down. And we hope that listeners would join us.
So we have like 1 minute left, and I want to have both of you give an opportunity to let our listeners know how to get in touch with your organization, websites, telephone numbers, Facebook.
Well, I specifically want them to sign the petition against the two bills that we were talking about in particular. So that's one. The other is
how do they find that?
So they can find that on Facebook. It has all the information on our Facebook page, which is Advancing Justice, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. It's on our Facebook page. I could also link it, or you guys can link it. We can do that too. But that's the most important. There's also a call in to particularly Ralston, and there's a number, a direct line too. So those are the two.
All the information is there. Okay, Azadeh. I forgot to mention that Azadeh is now with Project South. She was formerly the president of the National Lawyers Guild and was with ACLU, so her resume is like pages long. So Azadeh, how would people contact you and or your organization?
So people can go to our website, projectsouth.org, and we're also on social media, Twitter, Facebook. Please follow us. Project South is located in South Atlanta, and we obviously are focusing on the south of the U.S. And so we hope that you'll get involved with the various projects of Project South.
Well, thank you to both of you. So, listeners, you've just been hearing Stephanie Cho and Azadeh Shahshahani telling us all about the legislation pending before the Georgia Assembly that's anti-immigrant, racist, and xenophobic. And we want to encourage you to tune in again next Monday, 4 to 5, here at WRFG for the Labor Forum. Thanks a lot.
WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 FM, your station for progressive information. WRFG provides the voice for those who have been traditionally denied access to broadcast media through the involvement of a broad base of community elements to guarantee that access. And the utilization of the foundation's facilities and its programs, the following communities will receive first priority: those who continue to be denied free and open access to the broadcast media, and those who suffer oppression or exploitation based upon class, race, sex, age, creed, disability, sexual orientation, or immigrant status.
Atlanta Progressive News is an online independent news service. For 10 years, APN has provided original, compelling, unique coverage in keeping with our progressive policy priorities. Thank you to our readers for supporting us and our mission to empower Metro Atlantans to make a meaningful difference in the democratic process. We provide coverage of local government, public policy, activism, elections, and more. Our website, with over 2,300 articles and posts, is online at atlantaprogressivenews.com.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! I believe the governor of this state
should understand that his dereliction of duty was irresponsible. He should resign.